Let's turn down our ambient music. I feel like this is a good vibe for this stream because I believe this is supposed to be like 1940s-ish jazz, which overlaps the time period in our book, which is perfect. Let's undeafen and see if our guests are ready. All right, everybody ready to chat about some books? Amazing. All right, switch to book club screen. Hello, hello, friends. We are back for our monthly Twitch book club discussion stream. I think this is the 5th month going strong at keeping these consistent so far. Pat myself on the back, proud of myself. Today I'm joined by, thank you, joined by two guests, one who has been here before, one who is joining us for the first time, but I've known both of them on the online world for a very long time. So Somniloquy is back. Som's the little green square, green avatar on her screen here. And then joining us for the first time is Sassy Sunlight.
Hello. Not a first time on this stream ever, but first time in books.
Yes. And I'm very extra excited to have both of them joining today because they are two of the bigger nonfiction readers in our book club Discord so far. And they are part of my inspiration to encourage me to read a bit more outside of my fantasy, romantasy bubble more often. Because, you know, it's just like in the real world, you know, if you surround yourself only in too insular of a bubble, you just, you know, only consume the same things, your mind only limits its growth, you're in a bit of an echo chamber, and that extends to all things, including books. Of course, still read what you love, you know, read what makes you happy, but it's sometimes good to go outside that, and you never know, you might find something, a surprising new love. And then also extra excited Sassy's joining because Sassy's the one who mentioned this book. I'd never heard of this book, it was not even a blip on my radar before, and even just the title alone was like, this sounds intriguing. This sounds interesting. The sub kind of title was what got me, because like the Radium Girls at first almost sounds like a superhero sci-fi novel or something, like, you know, exposed to radium and they develop powers. But then the subtitle, surtitle, I don't know if there's a word for like the longer part, but the dark story of America's shining women. I was like, that sounds cool. I don't know what it means because I'd never heard of this whole phenomenon of the shining women and their contribution to modern day in many ways, but now I know. Although as we were getting ready for the stream, Sassy said something very interesting, because normally we start out broad picture overall ratings and then we get into the specifics parts of the book or what we thought, but Sassy made a hilarious comment because again, this was her, she mentioned this was a book on her list, her TBR, before I'd ever heard of it. And when I said I wanted to read more nonfiction, she said, "Oh, I'm very disappointed that this is the book that we're starting with. If I'm the one who wanted to make you read more nonfiction," and I was like, "Oh, save it for the stream. But do tell me, do get into that, please."
Yeah. I mean, the book overall is not like any other nonfiction that I've read, because it kind of. And maybe it is a good thing to introduce you to nonfiction that way, because it kind of reads like a novel. But for nonfiction, it almost felt like too novelly in a sense, where she was describing, the author, Kate Moore, was describing people's thoughts at certain moments in time, where I'm like, we couldn't, well, unless you have all of their diaries and all of their things of those specific moments, it almost seems like you're filling in for that character.
Interesting.
And once again, they started to feel more like characters than actual people in history, even though I know they were real, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, because I
really
think
started to feel more like a story.
Yeah, the aim of the book, from what I've read and how she pitched it, was to kind of like make it more about these women as individuals and less of like, because this phenomenon in history has been talked about in other books, I guess, but from a much less personal perspective and trying to highlight the women individually. But so clearly I think it did what she wanted, but for you're saying your experience, that takes away from the nonfiction element, because it's like, how do you know that those elements that you're putting in there are accurate, unless again there were diaries or interviews or something that she had access to.
And there was also like the I mean, maybe not really relevant for right now, but sometimes the way she was writing, like I did some little more research as she was writing this, because she was actually going to do a play about Radium Girls.
Interesting.
And then she did so much research that she wanted to turn it into a novel.
Okay.
Or like a nonfiction. But also, I totally get her wanting to make it more individualistic and making more about the stories that each of these individual women have.
Yeah.
But they were so many. And I would have probably. I mean, I'm not an author, will probably never will be an author, and respect for writing it. But at some point, I just got lost with all the women, all of their different stories, and where I would have maybe highlighted maybe a few of them, but for example, more like dedicated a whole like side in the back of maybe like all the names and maybe a little bit more about them.
Yeah,
right?
I would have loved like almost like a glossary, like in fantasy books they have at the back, like the appendix and glossaries, all the character names and like 2 to 3 sentences of like where they fit in the story. I almost feel like I needed that because I agree. Sometimes I would just get lost, and I get the aim was to talk about and to show how many women this affected, how widespread of a problem this was, and which makes it even more wild that it was ignored for so long. So it's like look how like epidemic almost this is, but it almost went too much that because then I was like even now I was looking up discussion questions for today in case I needed some more prompts, and one of the questions like which women do you identify with the most. I'm like, honestly, other than a few facts that just really stuck out, even though I read it, like I was simultaneously impressed upon like I empathize so heavily with all of them, their individual stories, but I can't recall almost any of the individual elements now in their names because there was just so many. It was overwhelming. It almost became like list form. And I get the intent, but I feel like it maybe missed the mark a little bit in that regard. Did you have a similar experience, or were you able to easily like keep them straight and remember all the different women?
The most I got mixed up was the locations, because I think there was 3 locations. There was Orange, Illinois, and Water something or other.
Oh yeah.
But I didn't have any issues with. Well, I definitely didn't have any issues with the male characters. They were easy to remember because there's so few of them. But no, I remember a lot of the women characters as well, like Maggie and Grace.
Yeah.
There's quite a lot to be.
Yeah.
There is a lot. There's a lot.
The one name that stuck out to me, and like I guess the person whose story was one of the girls was named Molly, and hers was pretty brutal. There was one woman where they were just vividly talking about, and quick super quick TLDR for anyone if you're watching but you haven't read the book. The premise of the book is about all these women who, through their job working at the United States Radium Corporation and making glow-in-the-dark watch faces using a glow-in-the-dark paint primarily composed of an element called radium, which was new and flashy at the time, had just been discovered. They were exposed to radium so much over time before people knew it was dangerous, and then after people knew it was dangerous but were keeping it on the down low, and they all suffered very severe, widespread radium poisoning. And it was about the slow emergence of this knowledge into the public of what radium was doing to these women and them trying to get justice. That's the gist of this book, talking about that period of history. And there was the most visceral moment to me that I was just like, I was like, this all of a sudden became like a Lovecraftian Cthulhu horror moment, but it was really happening because it affected their bones, and a lot of them, their jaw bones were so heavily affected because they would get exposed to so much paint in their mouths. And when they're talking about a piece of her jawbone just fell out through the roof of her mouth into her mouth because their bones were decaying, like moths were inside, like eating away at them. I was like, ugh, just imagining just like the roof of my mouth being so riddled with like sores and so thin and so like fragile that the pieces of my freaking bones just fell out and just started bleeding into my mouth. I was just, oh god, I had like a nightmare.
The saddest part of it was all those dentists that were trying to help but were making it worse along the run because they weren't healing. And I think that was for me almost the saddest part, because you're like, hey, I want to do something, I want to help you, and some of them even like covered like medical costs and stuff and did it for free, but it just kept on getting worse.
I remember reading in there that there was that one doctor. What was his name?
I will not be able to help because I listened to the audiobook a while ago, so a lot of the names have escaped. Yeah, sounds right. He originally covered the costs because he was sympathetic to them, but then later went on to
the United States Radium Company to them directly and said like, I will go be on your side if you cover my costs because this is getting too much for me.
Yeah, that part got my blood freaking boiling. I was like, it's so despicable. And I was like, this also reads like something that you would hear about in the news in 2025 with how all the, how capitalism has only become further and further corrupt and the system is just broken and all the greedy corporations putting profit over like basic humanity and survival and all things. But I'm just like, oh, shit like this probably still happens every day, and that would just made it extra infuriating. I can speak.
It was worse back then.
Yeah.
So I was curious how you guys would see it, but also I don't know how to pronounce this in English, so bear with me.
No worries.
But like the synthetics that are found in plastic, the PFAS, like I found a lot of like, how do you say that, overlapping of the story, like how radium is slowly getting recognized of like how bad it is, to now slowly like what we're seeing about PFAS and like what we know about it and how damaging it is.
Yeah. Well, I think there's so many parallels in our lifetime. I can think of things that that have become super popular or touted as these super great, like borderline miracle uses of products. Like even look at Ozempic and all the people that are going on Ozempic for health management, like other than for the diabetic like insulin thing it was made for, but for like weight related management and stuff, which again, if you've been put on it by a doctor, we're not here to shame you, we are not medical professionals, but the people who are using it more because it became this like trendy, supposedly easy thing to lose weight, all the TikTok memes about it, but it's like no long-term study has been done on using it for that purpose and all these things. Like who knows what decades from now we're gonna learn about all the people who used it for that. And even, or things like now, another parallel, we now know something called BII, breast implant illness, exists from, decades ago when everyone was getting breast implants and thinking, oh, this is totally fine. And now only decades later are we learning about the long-term health effects about having certain types of implants and stuff. So that kind of phenomenon of things being touted as harmless and exploding in popularity only to find out years later, oh shit, that was actually really dangerous. Maybe we should have like studied some effects a bit longer before we pushed this everywhere. Was an interesting parallel.
I don't think the comparison works. Maybe with microplastics to a degree, but with things like Ozempic, like we know exactly what it does, and it's been used in treatments for a long time. And radium, they knew exactly what it did as well, and they just let the girls suffer. And even the doctors suffered as well. Like Yvonne Shockey, despite the fact that he invented the compound they used to paint, he also died because of it as well.
Yeah.
Even
obviously, it's not an apples to apples comparison. And yeah, we know what it does short term. And there's lots of things we know what they do short term, but we have very good science to predict that what it will do long term, but we don't always know until we've given things time to actually find out. And there could still be down the line, like we don't know years and years later what using it for certain amounts of time for certain purposes is going to do. But
yeah, but I do get what Sam means. Like for example, with microplastics, it's also like the long-term effects of being exposed to it, rather than a medicine that you could get off of, or like maybe not have those effects with. For example, a research the other day was about how to make a PFAS-free lunch, which is almost impossible right now. And the fact that babies currently, through breast milk, are being fed PFAS because it's in your system.
Love me some microplastics.
Yeah, love that. And it starts as like, for example, when plastic was invented, almost as this wonderful thing that we could package everything safely with and use it for everything. And now we're starting to see the results. That was also one of the things with the Radium Girls that kind of shocked me. What I didn't know about is like how they would use it, for example, to do their makeup. They'd like intentionally put it on their face. They'd put it, or even it's like, oh look, haha, funny. Let's put it on our teeth and have glow in the dark teeth
for going out. And the fact that they were so covered in it, they'd be like, you could follow their footsteps. Like there would be glowing footsteps home, like into town to businesses while it like wharf. They would leave covered in so much of the residue. Also just like what an eerie, again, a lot of it almost feels like such like modern day horror elements happening in real time. Like imagine it's nighttime, you just see these like ghostly glowing figures of women every so often walking on the street because they're literally glowing from radioactive material on them, and how of course they were seeing at the times like, oh, it's beautiful, it's an aesthetic, but I'm like, I feel like that would be kind of like scary and like terrifying because it made me think of very ghostly elements rather than
also
like
just
attractive element.
My brain went like, how inconvenient is it to have your entire wardrobe like glow?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, and also then, of course, safety in 2025, the safety element, I'm like, you know how easy it would be for, like, a man to follow you and, like hurt you or take advantage of you? You're literally glowing in the dark, leaving a trail of glowing footprints because you're covered in this stuff. On the upside, everyone would know who attacked you if it happened because he'd be glowing. He would have the resin. So maybe you're actually safe. Oh, my God. It's like the modern day comparison. Have you seen on TikTok? I've seen videos or the internet where girls are now going out and like wearing an absurd amount of body glitter when they go out in public because they know if anyone were to touch them without their permission, like you're gonna get glitter on you because glitter doesn't go away. That shit is hard to escape. And my brain just now is like, oh man, the 2025 comparison to like being but not dangerous.
Yeah.
The way Kate Moore sort of like thematically like uses the glowing, she does use it as a sort of ghostly apparition type of thing, and the way I think there's one part of it where one of the girls hung up her some sort of like, I don't know what it's called, like a coat type thing on like on a pedestal or something in her boyfriend's house, and he didn't like it, and he felt like it was like a ghostly thing.
Like a
at
jump
that time
scare.
Lots of girls had already died.
Oh. But also,
I think it's just foreboding in that regard.
Yeah, it is. It is so foreboding, and it's also just interesting how again it's such this thing that later became such a, once it was truly understood, such a thing of like negativity and pity and fear, but before it was understood was like a status symbol, and like seeing one of the shining women or seeing a Radium Girl, because you know that they're making good money compared to everyone else for like jobs for women at the time. They also would like be dressed, they were dressed nicer, and then also put the radium on their nice clothes and stuff. So it was just like this thing that started out as such an envious status symbol, and then once it was known what was eventually going to happen to them all, for those that were still around and hadn't already succumbed to the poisoning, just like the turn, right, of seeing someone and the thoughts you might have like in the 20s seeing one of those women compared to in the 50s seeing one of those women, or the 40s for those. Many of them didn't make it to the 50s.
that was something that fascinated me, though, was that some of these women were able to like reproduce. And I'm not saying that like because like you had lead poisoning or you're like exposed to radium that you cannot have kids. You can, but I would have expected maybe like results in those children because of it.
Their kid to be born with like a third arm.
Well, not really in that regards, but like health issues, I guess.
Well, that's like they said, there's modern day still towns. I think even, I don't know if it was Orange exactly, but one of the towns where there was a radium plant and like a factory, to this date, that town has higher measurable cancer rates than all the surrounding towns. And there's no explicable reason other than, oh, we know for a fact radium has a half-life of 1,500 years, I think it was, or something. So, and that shit lingers in the soil. And like the one town, they had to go and like excavate, to make it safe, they went down something like 10 layers of soil deep, and like basically had to excavate and thoroughly decontaminate and clean out the whole town. And that only happened in the 2000s, which is crazy.
But that also fascinates me because I'm not sure, like, what are they able, like, maybe they are able to like concentrate it to like a little amount of radium instead of all that in the ground.
Yeah.
But all that ground is infected, and you cannot just get rid of that.
Apparently, so they think they can. I'll say, where do they put all the ground that was radioactive? Where'd they dump it? Because now that place is the new problem, you know?
They use I know of like places in the United States where they put radioactive waste. They basically bury it underground and
Yeah.
use like some sort of salt compound that, like, when it gets filled, it expands and then just buries it in salt.
Oh, okay.
So they bury it pretty deep underground, so it
Yeah.
shouldn't become an issue.
Gotcha.
They to make sure it doesn't become an issue as well. They write in different languages on stones outside to
Make sure
to
there is
basically
no
say,
chance.
do not go down here, you will die.
Damn.
Yeah.
That's wild. There was also something while we were reading this book. We read this book last month, and then it just took us a long time to find availability. That's why this is happening at the end of the month. I normally try and do these streams closer to the month we read the book in. But there's something that I think Sassy posted in the Discord while reading that I found. I had just finished the book, but I found also mirrored my thoughts, because you were about like halfway through or something. And you're like, I don't understand how there's still half the book left, given where we are. Like, it feels like we've already come pretty far in the story and told a lot. Even I thought once we got to the point where, all right, they know about radium now, and I was like, what is left? And I did find that interesting, because I guess the second half became all about the legal battles and the, like, there was like legal battle round 1, and then there was like legal battle round 2, like a decade or something later.
I think it was mostly the changing mostly of locations, what was happening. But yeah, I'm pretty sure it was even like a third way into the book that I was already like, I feel like this is coming to an end soon. But it wasn't.
Yeah, it was. No, I didn't feel like so much it was coming to an end, but more I felt like I've had the experience you wanted me to have as the reader, and you've achieved your goal pretty early into the book. So I wasn't sure how it was going to keep going, and I was worried I was going to like want to DNF it, because I was like, I feel like I already have gotten the whole story, but I didn't end up doing it. I did just still enjoy the latter half. I just think it maybe could have been tightened up a little more. Maybe it was a little bit like drawn
but that's also kind of going back to my thing of maybe focusing on lesser girls, or maybe lesser locations, or just or at least like line them up, even though timeline she kind of she kind of ordered it like kind of time wise of like how things happened, but also didn't stick to that always. But then I would have rather had that they almost were like two separate stories in the same location, kind of like having that narration next to each other. It's difficult to explain, but
I think I understand what you mean. Like when there's two things, like so it still stayed kind of like in a linear time perspective, but then we're telling the two stories of the two locations, the groups of women in the two locations side by side, like in tandem. Yeah.
And I think that would have probably captivated me a bit longer, because then indeed it takes a lot longer to reach the point of the story. But yeah, it was just too many women, like it, and that makes it sad, right? Because I do think that all of these women deserve their chance of like have their story be told.
It simultaneously achieved, like, I got the point, because the point was to show how a large spread of a problem it was, and how many women's pain we're ignoring for profit or for the other things. But at the same time, as a reader, it did then make it hard sometimes to keep going, because I'm like, this is just exhaustive trying to keep them all straight and trying to respect their memory by remembering and like being able to pick apart their individual stories. And this is the one time it's almost like they're almost stronger, or just see them as a monolith, as like this group of women, but obviously they were individuals, and the author's trying to make sure you get that. It was a very hard line, I think, the author had to walk, and she did a decent job, but it's just hard. It was fatiguing to read about, and not just because of like the emotional empathy of what you're reading. It was almost just like the effort of my brain of trying to keep all these names.
She could have easily made this into like a multi-book part series, right?
Yeah.
Like she could have, for example, or even just splitting the locations up in different books. And I actually think that then I would have been more positive about the books individually. And once again, because the story that she's trying to tell, she can tell it. Like, that's not the issue here, but it's just more of like the amount of stuff. It's like an information overload. Another part that when I was reading, one of the parts that just like stuck out to me is the most like
tug on your emotions and despicable part to read about too is it mentioned one of the girls who she lived a pretty long time with her radium poisoning. I've forgotten the name already because they all blended together, unfortunately, which was but then her sister, who had never worked at Radium Dial, died from poisoning because they shared a bed, and the girls were so radioactive that being near them, like, you could get sick. It was like secondhand smoke from like a cigarette smoker or something. And even like holding the photographs up to their bones, and the film on the photographs would like corrupt from the radiation coming off of them. And then so knowing it's like, okay, the corporations that are trying to cover this up and keep it going for as long as they can, it's not just these women you're harming, but who knows how many countless others in the proximity of these women that you're harming. Even talk about they're traipsing all over town covered in radium, bringing this to who knows where, let alone families that are like spending large amounts of time in proximity with them. But that made me so sad, that part. The woman who just shared a bed with her sister died from radium poisoning.
That might have been Looney Peg.
Yeah, I think so.
Because she used to live in, all her brothers and sisters, I think there's like, I don't know, half a dozen of them.
Yeah.
And they all used to live in the same bedroom.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was yeah, that's sad.
It's so sad.
I think saddest / most horrific thing that I found was when one of the girls died. Once again, also didn't remember the name, but the company wanted to steal her body.
Yes.
To, like,
That's the same lady, I think. I think Peg. That's Peg. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
They
that
wanted to
lady,
take a body.
her sorry for swearing.
18 plus streams, swear all you want.
Yeah, like, I think that was the saddest for me, because you know you're wrong, and you're willing to go to such an extent to cover it up that that you're willing to steal bodies from families.
Mm-hmm. And also just like how early it was, like that one guy, that one telltale comment that came back to haunt him years later with that one guy in the 20s was like, saw them doing the lip pointing and putting the brushes in their mouth, and he was like, hey, don't do that, you shouldn't do that, that's probably not good for you. But that was it. Yeah, but it's like it clearly implies that at least someone in the company knew from the almost jump, and we just kept going.
I mean, they knew it all along.
Yeah.
Which I also wouldn't find weird is that they just had like the comparison to like lead-filled paint.
Mm-hmm.
So like looking at a girl putting something in her mouth, one which was company property, so she was literally eating the radium, which is like bad for business, but also just like the association with pain. I don't always think like it has to be that they knew all along. Yeah. But yeah.
And also, there's one part too, I was looking up, again, discussion questions, and the one which, to me, it seems like, again, I'm heavily biased, but it didn't seem like there's room for much discussion. It's blatantly obvious, but there was even a point in the book where it kind of hinted at it. One of the questions was, if it had been men this was happening to, how do you think it would have been different? Like, would there have been bigger outcry? Would the company have reacted sooner, etc.? There was even a point in the book where they mentioned that there was the first male victim to get similar symptoms, and that's when some people started taking it kind of seriously. Cause I don't even remember the details. I just remember being livid, and I listened to most of this while walking my dog. I listened to the audiobook. And like I just stopped out loud, and I was like, of course they fucking cared when a man gets sick. And I think someone looked at me like across the street, and I was like, sorry. Like, so I know that some reference to that. It wasn't like a big deal in the book, and it wasn't like they pursued it really far, but there was the beginnings of rumblings, or the beginnings of people caring and corporations maybe caring when a man got sick, but then they didn't push it further. But it was still more than any of the women ever got until they brought their lawsuit. And so I'm like, yeah, of course it would have been. And again, I'm biased with the whole, one of my big soapboxes and my biggest gripes in the world is how women are treated in the medical system, also being a woman who is chronically ill. But I was like, of course it would have been different.
I mean, and at that point in time, I'm not sure like what the years are for that in the US and stuff, but were they even allowed to vote at that point? They weren't allowed to open an own bank account.
Let me double check. I think because they got the right to vote in the 20s, 30s? Hold on.
So it would have
I'm
been
gonna look
around
it up.
that time, roughly.
Oh, well, that's in Canada. I want the U.S.
It would
I
have
would have assumed.
been.
Yeah,
It's the
late
19th
19th,
Amendment.
early 20th centuries. The first state to grant the woman right to
1919?
vote was Wyoming in 1869, and then the last state wasn't until 1918. So it's only like a 50-year time span it took all the states to get on board.
Yeah, so basically they were living around a time where they
They had
found
just
that
gotten the
women
vote.
were smart enough or responsible enough to vote.
Yeah.
Like, note my sarcasm here.
Yep. Yep.
Despite the obviously horrors of the Radium Corporation stuff,
Mhm.
this was like a sort of a great awakening for women in the early
Yeah.
20th century, because they were able to make as much money as their dads. They were able
Yeah.
to have their own homes and build savings and
Mhm.
and work jobs, and they talk about enjoying their jobs. Like even after Grace left the Radium Company and worked in an office, even with her disabilities at this point, she talked about enjoying her job, liking her job, and wanting to be that independent. And
Mhm.
it's kind of like goes towards the sort of like sort of feminist angle of the characters being independent.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, it just adds to the heartbreak for me, because if they weren't getting sick, it was such a great option for women, and it did allow them to
Yeah.
have, like you said, so much more independence, and also the camaraderie and the community they formed. Like, and even before they started getting sick and they had to band together because they're like, no one's going to support us except each other. But even before that, when things were good, before anyone knew what radium was doing, because radium takes such a long time to show its effects, there was just such an obvious community built at these factories and amongst these women. And it was almost like, oh, before they got sick, almost enviable to read about, like having a group of friends that are that, like a community that you feel that happy with, safe with, and fulfilled with as well. And being, and
Yeah.
again, the favorable reputation that came with it, because you were looked upon. It was like, not only was it a job that paid women well and a job that gave them independence, but also a job they were respected for having. So some jobs, it's like, oh, you can do this and maybe be making money, but it would have been frowned upon. And like a woman having that much independence would probably have been like, oh, scoff at. But this was an exception to that.
It was
Do you
classified as an
think-
artistic job that actually helped them with the war
Yeah.
effort during 1918 as well. So they had a lot of
That
sort of,
too,
like,
they were
respect.
contributing to this whole, and all the propaganda and all the sentiment at the time about how noble what they were doing was, and like supporting our country and supporting this war and stuff.
The thing I do find interesting, like, yes, the radium watches and stuff, they made a lot of money,
Mhm.
but I did find it interesting that the job paid so well, just out of the capitalistic standpoint.
I think it's
Makes
because
sense.
like,
the way they paid them was per watch face painted, right? So yeah, it paid really well, but they had to because it incentivized output. And the only reason they could afford it was because if the girls are busting their asses to produce so many of these, and then they can profit off that many more, like it shows you how much money I think they were making hand over fist, that they also could remunerate them so well.
yeah,
And not be penny pinchers about it. And it just, the whole model was set up to incentivize, the more productive you are, the more you work, the more output, the better off you'll be.
It goes to show you how kind of stupid the Radium Corporation ended up being anyway.
Yeah.
They could have easily, at that point, done the glass pens. They could have innovated
Yeah.
and made it so that the women could actually paint freely and safely at the same time and still get paid a significant amount of money. But they decided not to save a little bit of cash, which they couldn't end up doing in the end when they were.
Well, that's like,
forced
there's
into
so many
lawsuits.
things that, like, companies that do that nowadays, like, oh, we don't want to incur this cost, which it might even be a large cost short term, but long term it's going to maybe save our business model, or save the planet, or do all these things that it's like any short term impediment is just such a fucking ordeal. Like, you think you're asking them to, I don't even know. I don't have a good comparison, good metaphor, but just that mentality of like, we forego short-term loss for a long-term gain, I feel like is a dominant attitude even now.
yeah.
It's just the nature of business. Like employees are a cost of business.
Yeah.
Same way IT is a cost of business. These things are costs of business, but they end up If you don't pay for IT, you lose all your stuff to ransomware.
It's like the last book that Sam and I both read, nonfiction book, the tuberculosis one, because even talking about how, it'd be very much more expensive to do all the testing for, like, the more in-depth form of testing they can do that also tests for the rapidly, like, mutating tuberculosis or whatever kind it was, but it's more expensive, so we'll keep doing the shittier testing that only catches part of the cases, but we know you're making us spend more money than in the future to treat all these tuberculosis patients because you couldn't catch them early. So even though it seems like you're spending more money short term to do all this testing, long term you would be saving money because you're now not making all these medicine resistant cases of tuberculosis. And it's just like, why? And we know this is now, like, we understand this principle of how, yes, long term this could still be beneficial for you, even though right now it seems like an unnecessary cost. And it just blows my mind that more often, like, that mentality doesn't matter. Just silly. Silly.
Yeah, like, I think that's, well, not once again the saddest, because, like, there's
all of it's sad
parts in the book. But yeah, it's kind of reading it and knowing that, like, if this were to happen again, it would go the exact same way.
Yeah, like, I have zero faith, especially, like, especially the legal cases too. And there's been so many major legal letdowns in our lifetime in the past, like, decade, that I'm just, like, day by day lose so much faith in the legal system as a whole that I could 100% see this repeating itself in some other scenario in 2025.
Yeah.
This whole,
definitely,
like,
America,
trajectory. Yeah, definitely in America. Oh God, especially with, all of the anti-science, anti-logic people in power right now. And making medical related decisions too.
One of the cool things in the book I got is I got a, which was published by Simon and Schuster UK. I got a nice photographic paper in the middle point, which has photographs of the people involved, the girls specifically, as well as other problematic parts. That photo you have on your book, with the 5 ladies there, those are the 5 ladies in the original trial. That's Quinta, Edna, Albina, Catherine, and Grace on the far right. But this also includes the sarcomas. There's this one picture of a painter with a sarcoma on her chin.
See, again, a disservice I get by reading the audiobook, because obviously I do not get visuals reading an audiobook.
I'm so glad I didn't get these visuals. Like, I did see the photo of the girls. I did get that one, but I didn't. Oh, yeah, no. See,
in that picture, they're really heavily in the throes of radiation sickness. It's a shame you can't see the bottom half, because the second one in on that one, which is Edna, the way she's leaning up against a wall, she's leaning there because one of her legs is so much shorter than the other one. She's having to lean up against the wall, and you can tell from the way her legs are that it's because one of them is massively shorter than the other. I've also got a nice picture of Molly's jaw here as well, which would have been the one that corrupted the tape picture. There's also pictures of all the dowel painters sitting next to each other after a company picnic.
Oh, I found a picture of a newspaper headline from when the second group, like, won their case. Even the headline, "Living Dead Win in Court." Because that is how, once it was known what Radium was doing, they made a list of all the women who worked in these factories, and it was literally like the list of the living dead or something that they called it, because they all had an expiration date. And we all knew it was coming. What a morbid headline. Goodness me. Oh, I found the picture of the sarcoma on her chin. Oh my God, Sassy, don't look.
That's a really famous picture.
Yeah. Don't look. Oh God. Oh.
Yeah. And
there's also. Yeah. Oh, sorry. There's another picture of one of the dowel painters with cancer of the knee. So that would have been another sarcoma, and it's just like, even though it's black and white, it is horrific to look at.
Yeah. Oh, even here's one where a woman's mouth is open. You can see how just, like, messed up her jaw is, because she was one of the ones who had her jaw heavily affected. Goodness me.
Where sarcoma works is that, like, the bone keeps on growing tumorously, and it just stretches and pushes everything out of the way, so all the flesh and bits and pieces. Yeah, it's just a nasty way to go.
Which, and it makes, I also found it fascinating how they explained why it did that, because the radium mimics calcium, and where does calcium get stored? In your bones. And I was like, oh, that is wild.
Yeah, I didn't know that either, and I found that really interesting. And another thing that I found interesting was as I was reading some of the Goodreads reviews after I was done,
Yeah.
um, I think because I'm bilingual, I actually found a lot of like the descriptions of like what happened to these women less horrific than they were, because the language
Oh.
actually, like the translation actually put like, I read it in English, but because I'm translating in my head, it almost felt like more of a distance to it,
Yeah.
because the words of the illnesses and stuff, they don't hold the same weight as they do in your native language.
Oh, 100%.
So like I think you mentioned earlier like a sarcoma or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that doesn't give me any feelings or something.
Yeah.
Like just hearing that,
Interesting.
which like I think because a lot of people would probably be like, "Hey Sassy, why would you read that? That's horrific shit." And I actually found it very easy to read, and I think it's probably because of that.
That's very interesting. It's like one of my favorite books ever is the book, and even though it's a fantasy book, but it's like historical fantasy, and there's so much educational content in it. It's called Babel by R.F. Kuang, and it's set in Oxford University in England in the 1800s. And it's all the book, even though it's fantasy, is really about colonialism and the use of language. Because the fantasy element of that book is there's a magic system based on translation and the minor differences between words and between phrases when translated between languages. Because the premise is like you inscribe on like a silver bar, like in one language, either the word or the effect that you want to achieve, and on the other side of the silver bar, you inscribe it in a different language. But what little bit you lose, like the subtle change from one language to another, because almost nothing is a one-to-one other than like individual words, right? Like the meanings will shift ever so slightly, or there are some subcontext that gets lost, and the difference in the two translations is the magical effect that would happen. So it's all about, and so the people who do magic, quote unquote, are actually like language scholars and study all these different languages, dead languages, real like languages still around, and the whole book talking about the power of language and the use of translation and how it affects our perception of the world was very interesting. And it's it very much what you said is a real world example of that. Because as someone who doesn't, I'm learning lots of languages, but I don't know any enough. Yeah, I could confidently read a book in another language right now. That's something I want to do once in my life. I want to read a book in a language that isn't my first language and see what that's like.
It also reminds me of like when I was in bilingual school, our teacher really had to like emphasize on that the meaning of curse words in different languages have such like a different like effect. Like for example saying fuck or shit or like that the load that comes with it, because like especially in a lot of European languages nowadays, we've borrowed some English curse words, but they don't always mean the same or have the same weight to it.
Yeah.
So then you start speaking English, and then suddenly, like, yeah, that could be a deal breaker in a conversation. And it's really interesting how that evolves.
Yeah. I remember one time, like when I was a teenager or something, and I even like I think I called someone like a twat, and my mom was like, "Oh my God, Laura, it's such a horrible word." Like that basically was a swear word. I was like, "What do you?" And then like I went and lived in the UK, and I'm like, "What do you mean? People call each other that? Like you've been joking to your friends, like, oh, you like you fucking idiot, you stupid twat," and we're like we'd use it all the time. I don't know, but it's funny how people's perception of certain words and their usage from like one person to another, one culture to another, is always fascinating. So what did you give overall rating to this book? Normally we start with that, but we just got so drawn in already with other things. I gave it a 3 stars because again, my logic is if I finished the book and I enjoyed it, 3. Finished the book and I like loved it or like really like it, 4. And then like it's this has changed the way I look at the world. I will think about this for whatever. Or this is one of my new favorites. That's a 5. So I read it and I liked it. Again, I had trouble just with the writing style at times. Again, the way what we've already discussed, but I still mostly was just like, this is something I did not know a single thing about. I knew nothing about any of these women, about this whole facet of history, the modern day implications, how much also we have to thank these women for, like modern day environmental laws. A lot of them, their groundings are from the after effects of these women and radium poisoning and where they dumped the radium waste and stuff. So just for the almost like the gratitude of being like, I would never have known about this, and this feels very important to know about. It got a 3 stars for me.
That's interesting. So you also base it more on
How I
the
feel at the end of the book.
event-
Yeah.
Yeah, but also the historic event that actually took place, rather than the book.
Yeah.
In a way.
Yeah, it's
Which
very subjective.
I understand, but I've never looked at it that way. Yeah. I think personally I gave it 2 stars, and that was not because I don't think stories shouldn't be told. I think I actually the 2 stars are mostly because of that part and that it should be told and stuff. But because as a book and also as a non-fiction book, I just really did not enjoy how it was written.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fair.
Yeah.
I think 3 stars is probably pretty fair.
Yeah.
I totally get that.
I'm not the way it's written is more of like a story in a sense.
Yeah.
Almost like sort of third person type of thing, rather than like a more historical take. However, there is so much information in here, and you get so much from it. It is a historical account with just a little bit of like autobiographical. Oh, I remember exactly what I said 25 years ago when I was speaking to my son about my cancer diagnosis, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it's good, and I like the characters because they're not characters, they're people.
They're real people.
It's very easy to write someone really well if they're an actual human being.
Yeah, you don't have to worry about did I make them 3-dimensional, because they were real 3-dimensional people.
They're actual human beings, so it's not too bad. I liked how she included all the characters and all their flaws as well. Like, there's a lot of men in this book that make a lot of fucking mistakes.
Oh.
And there's only like, I think maybe one that was ever really truly good the entire time outside of the girls' husbands, and even them weren't always good.
Yeah.
And that was it Barry, I think?
I think
so, yeah.
Yeah, and it's an unfortunate, well, and even he had his one final moment of not being great where during I think the second case he took for the girls, part of the settlement they agreed on was that he would never do it again. He would never raise another lawsuit against
the company.
Which is not really his fault. He tried his best for the lady he had to represent, but it was just a bit shit.
Yeah. Especially had so much pressure on those legal professionals, because obviously, like any high-profile case like that, it's one of the most probably high-pressure jobs that are out there. But when it's like, my clients, even if we win, might not live long enough to really make benefit of this, like of the settlement and their money. It's like the pressure to get it done that much sooner, just so they try and, in what time they have left, reap some benefit from this. But obviously to them it wasn't about that. To the women it was about protecting future women and about justice and about educating the public. I don't think for most of them it was about, other than just like, hey, I'd like to pay off my medical bills. Other than that, I don't think most of them it wasn't individual or personal gain they were going for at all, was the vibe I got. But again, that goes back to Sassy's thing, like, we really, unless, like, again, journals, interviews, diary notes, we can't really know that, because that's very much a personal, in-their-head thought. But that's the way it was presented.
And that's almost making me want this author to have a nonfiction about this nonfiction. Just with all the research and all the things, you know, like, it sounds so silly to say it, but that is more what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
If there were like retellings or like the interviews with the grandchildren or anything like that, like, give it to me. I'll eat it up.
Yeah, because like the last book, the nonfiction one, the Everything is Tuberculosis, that Sam and I read, didn't have that problem because like the Henry and the people he was talking about were living in real time. The author himself personally interviewed them, like they're people, so I didn't have that problem. Not that I probably would have, because again, that was a interesting thought I didn't even think to question about, or didn't cross my mind until you brought it up. But if I had, in that book, it wouldn't have been an issue because it was all people that are still around and that he had directly asked, that he had put these, like, their thoughts in here. That's definitely going to be something now at the forefront of my mind when I read other books. I'm going to be like on the hunt now. Like, are we putting words in people's mouths? Do we know that they thought this? Are we sure about this? It's gonna affect
once again, I do 100% believe that Kate Moore did her research, right?
Yeah.
Because of the amounts of information we are given.
Yeah.
And I think if I would judge a book just for that, she would get 5 stars, like 100%. I just, yeah, I want to know the process. I want to know like everything she got.
Yep.
He has a lot of stuff in the bibliography. At least
True,
in my
true.
edition, there's a lot of like news articles she read, autobiographies, letters that she got from Rhoda to other people in the company,
Yeah.
loads of news articles and such about the situation, interviews. There's a lot of like personal quotes and stuff like that that she's gotten from those kind
Yep.
of second party sources.
Yeah, but I think those second party sources, that is what I would want to read a book on almost. Like, I want to hear about those interviews.
So
I
you
wanna
would have
hear
liked
about...
if she'd put a bit more of the direct source material in there rather than
Yeah.
put the information in there, but it still sounds like it's coming through her. You're like, I would have liked some of the direct, like like put some of the actual exact quotes in there. Don't just retell it, or maybe put even pictures of any of the print or the physical media that she got some of this information from.
Yeah, or
things
things
like that.
her children or her grandchildren would describe her as such and such and such, you know? Kind of like little things where I would be like, oh, that's where she got it from.
One thing that reminds me of, because also I love in books that do anything in an interview format, I like when they put it in there in actual interview, like name, colon, and what they said, person's name, almost so it reads more interview script like. I read another audiobook, again, another nonfiction audiobook recently, because you've inspired me, and it was a memoir from a journalist. It was called What My Bones Know by Stephanie Fu. It's about a journalist who found out she has complex PTSD, CPTSD, which I didn't even know was a thing. And the subtitle is A Memoir About Healing from Complex Trauma. And it's both about the physical impact of trauma, not just like, obviously everyone thinks about the mental health part of things like PTSD and trauma, but the physical, tangible component, which I learned a lot of wildly fascinating things in that book. But one part at the end, she talks about finally finding this right doctor or therapist that had their sessions are finally in a style that basically is suited to how she's going to heal, without getting into tons of details. And rather than paraphrase or talk about it, they recorded their sessions, and she got permission. They put the actual recording, so you heard her talking to this like psychiatrist or whatever his thing is, and like the actual guy's voice and her voice, because she was the narrator of her own book for the audiobook as well. And I was so enthralled during those parts, knowing like this is not just you retelling me about what happened between you and him, like these are the recordings, like this is his voice. You are not, there's no way you could change what he said to you because I'm hearing it exactly. It was fascinating. And also that's a digital format, and what you're saying is like almost like a print version of that, some at least incorporated partially in this book for certain elements. You would have loved that.
Yeah, like I thinking about it, I wouldn't necessarily know if I would love to know like the actual recordings of like a session like that or a therapy session. I get that it's like an amazing experience and like an honoring experience to like have that, but I think somewhere in the middle.
That's a bit too much. That's a bit too close to. To the moment for you.
Also, I don't want to hold up every author to a standard that they would have to release their recordings with their therapist.
Yeah. Well, this one was also specifically, it was about her, right? And about it's a memoir, so it's different. Like a memoir is different from a nonfiction book, which is a bit more like there is a bit more of that distance. Even though they're trying to make it personal, really, but there is still a bit of distance between the author and the subject, whereas a memoir there is no distance between the author and the subject. They are one and the same. So if anyone, it's a very, very heavy read, so if you're in a bad place, don't read it. But if you are interested, it was a fascinating memoir and about the effects of trauma and healing from trauma. It was very interesting. Complete tangent, complete sidebar. One little thing that kept confusing me in this book was one of the places they kept mentioning was Ottawa. And Ottawa is the capital of Canada, but there's two Ottawas. There's also an Ottawa in the US, I have now learned. And it kept confusing the crap out of me because I'd mentioned it and be like, wait, we're in Canada all of a sudden? And then I would forget, like, no, we're still in the States. Different Ottawa. Super jarring.
It reminds me of in the Netherlands there are like little there are cities sometimes named after a place. So
Yeah.
Portugal is also like a city here.
Really?
Yeah,
That's
it's
fun.
spelled with like I think double A instead of one A, which is weird. But like, yeah, in the U.S. also, how many cities are named the same across states
Yeah.
is fascinating to me.
Oh my god, I
But
Oh
know.
my
that's
god, yeah. How many Birminghams there are?
yeah,
Yeah, or
Oh, in the
even
original
like,
Birmingham.
or Harlem. Harlem is everywhere.
or there's just so many towns in the UK that there's like 8 of them in different states. Like living in the UK
Yeah.
and then coming back here. Wild.
Manchester, Birmingham.
So many. Or even neighborhoods. It's wild. Final other book related but slight tangent. And now seeing those pictures, I kind of almost wish I had. I am currently playing in. I am a member of the podcast with Tales of Initiative, link in chat, and we're on our second arc. It's a TTRPG based podcast, and right now season 2 we're playing Vampire the Masquerade, and it's set in Chicago in this time period. Or the characters we're playing would have been made vampires in this time period that this book took place. And when I was trying to come up with a character concept for a while, and I'm playing the class of vampire called Nosferatu, which is the one like physically deformed, like monstrous vampire class in this TTRPG. And for a while, because I was also reading this book at the time, I was debating letting the description of what had happened to some of these women inform like the physical affliction of my Nosferatu character, and then I ultimately didn't. I went with a different character option because of the setting and because of another like a hyperfixation interest of mine. Won't go into details because it'd be a spoiler if you're gonna watch the podcast or listen to the podcast, and you should because it's great. But now seeing those pictures, I kind of wish I had, because I'm like, oh man, they're just so visceral, and coming and like translating that to also like this vampire character, and then also it could be a character would have been made a vampire to escape her radium poisoning. Like I could have made a vampire who was a radium girl and was so desperate to not succumb to the illness, like let herself be changed into a vampire, only to find out, hey, guess what? Yeah, you were saved from your illness, you're no longer in pain, but you are gonna look like this, like an even worse version of what you were for eternity. Oh, now I have regrets. It would have been so fascinating.
I find it fascinating how you can link this nonfiction book to a TTRPG. Like, coming into the stream, I did not think we would go there.
I can link anything to a TTRPG, Sassy. I have a problem. But it's just because our storyteller told us that we have to make characters that became vampires between 1890 and 1940. And that's exactly when radium was booming. That is like the almost exact era.
Yeah.
Which also means, and now think about like my current character that I am playing, she isn't a radium girl, but she would have known and seen radium girls. She would have seen these things. She would have seen the glowing women in the streets. She would have been around for the legal battles. That's cool. That's crazy. That's a crazy thought.
Is your DM aware of this?
Well, it's funny, the character concept I did come up with, I said to the DM, it's like, funny you should pick this. You've stumbled upon my one, like, veil/boundary, the one thing I'm super uncomfortable about. Like, oh my god, I'm so sorry, I'll change it. And it's like, no, we can work with this. I'm just gonna have to put some safety limits in place for your character concept because of their own personal shit. And I was like, now, also more, like, maybe I should have gone with the Radium Girl character because it wouldn't have come up against our storyteller's personal issue. But
yeah,
anyways,
it happens.
Clearly this book inspires a lot of different thought. There's a lot of different parallels you can draw reading it to current day as well as other historical situations. If you were someone like me and you had never heard of, like, you saw this title and you're like, what's a Radium Girl? America's Shining Woman, what the fuck is that? Highly implore and recommend that you read this book, because again, there are a lot of just the trajectories of some of these stories are still kind of like attitudes or problems I think we have in modern day society, and also these women deserve to be remembered because without them there would be a lot of things that look very different today. A lot of like EPA environmental regulations, a lot of I'm sure there's a lot of medical things that'd be very different especially if we were, because
Place
they were,
regulations.
yeah, and they were also using radium like it was a miracle cure for everything. They're kind of like, if you watch My Big Fat Greek Wedding, the dad thinks Windex can fix everything. It's like, oh, you broke your leg? Have some radium. Oh, your hair's thinning? Oh, radium will fix that. Like, radium was just this, it was everywhere at the time. And who knows for how much longer it would have continued to be everywhere, and how much it would have been used and how many more people could have gotten sick if
It might have
these
been the
women
death
didn't make their case.
of snake oil, to be honest. This series of events.
Yeah.
True. So it's a very, very, like, the writing style you may or may not vibe with, either the physical or the audiobook. I will say too, the audiobook narrator, not the best. I had to listen to it on 1.5 speed because she talked so slow. I realize I talk fast, but she talked so slow.
Is 1.5 the max you'll go?
It's the max I've ever gone. I've never gone, because I feel like doing 2 times speed. Obviously, no shade to however anyone reads. If you're a 2 times speed audiobook listener, you do you. But to me, it almost feels like if I rush it too much, I'm gonna somehow like change the experience they want me to have. But sometimes I just can't deal with how slow they talk, and I'm like, I got shit to do. Make your point. Like, come on. So
I usually start at like 1.5 to like ease my way into the story, and once I'm into the story and how the person reads it, then I go up to 2.
interesting.
Because then I already know kind of like how they speak. But yeah.
Yeah. See,
It
me,
depends
my
on the
default seems to
narrator.
be 1.25, because most audiobooks are a little bit slow for me, because they're obviously the average person, I think, probably definitely doesn't talk as fast as I do, and listens, needs a bit more of a measured pace. So 1.25 is my default, but if the narrator is particularly drawn out or slow, or if the book, I'm interested enough, I want to finish it, but I'm not completely vibing, then I'll pump it up to 1.5. But yeah, interesting. Brain Cabinet says, I turn my audiobooks to 0.8 speed because it makes it sound more comfortable for him, and it saves you money because the book lasts longer. Also true. See, I want the book, I have too much to read. I want my books to go faster, not to rush the experience, but if I can finish it faster, move on to the next one, so I can consume more books, because I am a book dragon who will never be happy and there are never enough, then that's what I want.
Yeah, Kindle Unlimited and stuff is not really a thing here, so I just have a separate book audio subscription, so I can listen unlimited audiobooks. So for me, listening slower would actually make me lose money. But the funniest thing is, with the unlimited subscription, every once in a while, I write down all the books that I've listened to, and then look up the price of it, and then look up the price of my subscription.
Feel better about yourself.
I feel so proud. I save so much money.
I love it. Did you guys get this book from like a library, or did you buy a copy to read?
I bought a copy from Waterstones.
Okay. Are you going to keep your copy, or are you going to donate it now that you've read it? Are you someone who's like, unless you love the book, do you then rehome it and so someone else can enjoy it, or do you keep all your books as book trophies?
Right now, because I only really started blasting books this year and trying to get through one a month. Not one behind right now. One behind. But right now, I don't have enough to worry about it, but I can see myself worrying about it maybe next year. Probably. So I'll probably start either getting people to borrow my books and then leaving them there, or just putting it into a library.
Nice. So Sassy, you read a physical book too, right?
So I borrowed a library copy, and I listened to the audiobook at the same time.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, my audiobook is from the library, because our library has a decent audiobook collection that you can take out.
Nice. Yeah.
I don't know if I could ever do audiobooks. They're just I find it hard enough to take in information reading a book normally, probably because I have ADHD untreated. And whenever I'm reading a book, I sometimes have to read the same page again and again and again before I can actually understand the information. And I think having an audiobook would make that even harder.
If you could be doing something else at the same time, because ADHD, because like I said, I always listen to them when I'm walking my dog or when I'm like cooking dinner, are the two things. So I'm also physically doing something else. Maybe it would help with the ADHD, because I know some people, their ADHD works like that. And because they're not dedicated to just sitting there and only listening to the book, they're physically doing something else, their brain can still take in the information. But do you not feel like that's how it would translate for you?
I sometimes listen to music, but it has to be without lyrics.
Oh, okay.
But
Gotcha.
it doesn't really help that much. I mean, this book wasn't too bad because it's not as wordy as some
Yeah.
philosophical texts that I've done in the past. But this one, I
I
I can read it without any noise in the background and it's fine. It wasn't too bad, this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, so with my
But I can't do it.
ADHD personally, it's very like hit or miss, and so some books I can read audio, some books I really cannot. I find that nonfiction, audiobook wise, is top tier for me. And sometimes with like fantasy books, I also like to just go back and reread certain kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So then I just prefer the physical ones, but nonfiction and audio, yeah, I love doing my dishes with
Yeah.
that on, and I hate doing my dishes.
Yeah, I used to back in the day, like years ago. The only time I used audiobooks was specifically books I'd already read, and I used them to help fall asleep. Because I didn't read new material for the first time, and I've only just come back to audiobooks this year and actually reading new ones for the first time because with the new puppy and the new schedule, I have way less time to myself to like sit there and physically read a printed book. And to keep up with my reading goal, I was like, I need to find ways that I can read while dealing with the dog, so audiobooks, and that's why I've come back to them.
Yeah. Yeah, and sometimes like I work full time, and then after work I'm just too fried to read a book, but listen to a book sometimes does work.
Yeah.
So
Also, listening to an audiobook in the bathtub is really nice. A nice, like, relaxing hot bath. Light a candle, but I can still be
That
reading
sounds
and not risk
amazing.
dropping a book. Because I would read physical books in the bathtub, but I'd be so worried about dropping the book in the water or getting it wet. Anyways, so yeah, our overall, it seems to be our average rating, group rating for this book is 3 stars. We all still enjoyed it. For us, 3 stars is still enjoyed, a thumbs up
Yeah.
rating. I know some people that are super critical. It's like anything less than a 4 was like, not for us, not here.
No.
So if any of what we talked about sounds interesting to you, this part of history or this story sounds interesting to you, if it doesn't sound interesting, but you just think you want to learn about something new and something important that happened in history, then we recommend you give The Radium Girls a try by Kate Moore. And shut up, my watch, I wasn't talking to you. Jesus. All of a sudden, some spout nonsense at my wrist. Psalm and Sassy, thank you so much for joining me, and again, just for continuing to bring nonfiction books to my radar and make me read outside my fantasy bubble. And looking forward to the next one. Again, this summer, I have a lot of fantasy releases that are on my radar, so I probably won't read another nonfiction for a month or two. But then when I come back to that, I'm like, all right, it's time. I'm gonna hit you up again and be like, what's on your radar? What's something you're interested in?
But before we close off, what are your vibes about the Gilmore Girls?
Like the TV show?
Yeah.
It's what I watch to go to sleep. It's my comfort show. I probably know every single word of that show.
Have you read the memoir of Kelly Bishop?
No, it's on my list.
I listened to the audiobook and she narrates it, and it's amazing.
Oh, I gotta. Cause that's the other thing I could see such a big case for audiobooks. Again, because that one I read that was a memoir, having the author be the narrator just makes it feel so much more impactful because it's their words and now it's also their voice, like telling it to you. So, that's so. Oh, I'm totally doing that. That's such a good idea. Thank you.
Just
Amazing.
between all your releases.
Yeah. Well, again, that could be the next audiobook for while I'm dog walking and doing whatever. Because all my audiobooks come through the library. I don't have like an Audible membership, and I don't purchase them as much because I want them. If I'm purchasing a book, I want the physical book trophy because I'm a book wagon. But the caption struggled because I said dragon funny instead of book dragon. It said Volkswagen. Haha, lol. Anyways. Thanks for hanging out. Cookie560, thank you for the follow. Much appreciated. And
hey, Cookie.
Thank our guests for joining us. When I put this on YouTube, I'll have links to whatever their preferred platforms are, where they're most active in the description box. So if you're watching this, that's where to find our guests. If you're watching this live on stream, then wait till I post it on YouTube and then go look in the description box. Active? Nowhere.
Nowhere.
Then it's extra special that you joined us
Blue Sky.
today. Yeah, I was like, Psalm's on Blue Sky. I did tag him in my post on Blue Sky today, so there you go. We're also in actually, well, at least me and Psalm are in the Level Select Discord, which isn't open to anyone, public Discord. So you can also hang with us there if you want. Link in the chat. And thank you so much. Our next book club stream next month, it might end up being on a solo stream with just me if I can't get any guests to join me, because I kind of did a selfish unilateral decision instead of voting. I was like, we're picking this book because I am desperate for it. I have been waiting for it forever. I want to read it. I want to talk about it. I read it in almost one sitting. It was stunning. So next month, we'll be talking about Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil by V.E. Schwab, which is a historic vampire novel, lesbian vampires in history. Basically, my review was, if you've ever watched or read Interview with the Vampire and thought this was great, but more women, then read this book. It gives you everything Interview with the Vampire does, but better and women instead of men. So that's what we'll be talking about next month.
Instead of men or with men?
Instead of men. There's very few men in that book. Very few men. They're around. Most of them aren't great. But yeah, it was I devoured that book. It was incredible. So it might just be me if I can't find anyone else who read it or has the time in our Discord to talk about it. But we've done one other solo stream where it's just me talking about the book and with some prompts and questions. And of course, anyone in chat, you guys who are watching, welcome to join in on the conversation. But hopefully I'll be able to find some guests to join me. And I'll keep you posted. Again, if you want to join our book club Discord for the months where I'm not selfish and I actually let people vote on what we read, then the link is in the chat. It's also, any of my streams, it'll be pinned, or you can find it, or just like ask me anywhere. I'll post the link somewhere, because I would love to get some more people joining us, have some more readers. And again, we read, as you can tell, a wide variety of genres, because we were talking about a nonfiction book this stream, and we're reading about talking about lesbian vampires next one. So the whole spectrum of book material. Thanks for hanging, everybody, and we'll see you in the next one, and hopefully in the book club Discord. Bye.
Thanks for having me.
Happy reading.
Bye.
Bye.